Oh, there we go.
And then play from start.
Ready?
I believe we're ready.
Amy can do the intro again.
Yes. Frankie Bailey is a professor in the School of Criminal Justice, University at Albany. She specializes in mass media, popular culture, and crime history. Her nonfiction books include African American mystery writers. Frankie's mystery novels feature Southern crime historian Lizzie Stewart and Albany, New York police detective Hannah McCabe. Her short stories have been published in EQMM, Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, and in several anthologies. Two of the stories feature former World War II Army nurse Jo Radcliffe. Frankie is working on her sixth Lizzie Stewart novel. She's also working on a historical thriller set in 1939. Frankie is a past executive vice president of Mystery Writers of America and a past president of Sisters in Crime National. And in addition to this, she was a featured speaker at the International Agatha Christie Festival, which takes place every year in Torquay, Devon, UK, which was Agatha Christie's birthplace. And I think she grew up there as well, didn't she, Frankie? Would you like to tell us a little bit about your speaking, your presentation at the conference and how you got involved with that? I believe you were also interviewed by Lucy Worsley while you were at that event.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I was invited before the COVID pandemic, and I had planned to go over, and then because travel was being cut back, I canceled, and they said, we'll invite you next year. And I didn't really think they would do it, but they did. And then I couldn't go that next year. And finally, the third time, they said, you're invited. And you can do Zoom or you can come over. I said, I'm coming over because how could I pass that up? And so I flew into Dublin and had 3 days there and then flew over to do the conference. It was a lot of fun. Really, the one thing I regretted was I didn't get to tour Agatha Christie's house because only 20 people could go on the tour and a dinner in the house, and I was too late to register, so I didn't get to do that. But it was a really interesting tour, then. Interesting group of people. And I
Yes.
did do the interview for the third part of the documentary that Lucy was doing. And she was really great about that.
So this is part of the presentation of that presentation, if I'm correct. This is the
This
influence.
is, yeah,
Yeah,
they wanted me to talk about how Agatha Christie placed her in context and then talk about how she might have influenced writers of color. So this is a bit of that and then some other research that you have here.
terrific. So if you're ready to begin, if you'd share this presentation with us, I know we're all eager. I think you have a lot of Agatha Christie fans here in this
Yeah,
meeting.
and I'll go through it fairly quickly so we can talk about it. So,
Sounds great.
is okay. So Agatha Christie was born in 1890 and she lived until 1976, and so she had a fairly long life. And as you all probably know, she was a World War One nurse and pharmacist, and that was really the spark for all of the poison plots she has. She was married twice, and actually her husbands were not particularly supportive of what she was doing. They were not against it, but they didn't really. The first husband didn't really want to listen to her ideas about her plots, and the second was supportive of what she was doing, but never read her novels. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic there. She believed in the old-fashioned type of marriage where the wife was doing domestic kinds of things, and the husband was doing the manly things in the house, but she traveled a lot with the archaeologist's husband. She debuted with her first novel in 1920. In 1930, she was the co-founder of the Detection Club, this group of British mystery writers who came together and agreed on the Knots Commandments about writing mysteries and this fair chance of giving readers a fair chance to solve the mystery. So it's the idea of, this puzzle mystery that they were doing, and readers would have an opportunity to solve it. And that was the way she was getting started with the mysterious affair styles, where she introduced one of her most important characters. Okay, ready for the, I'll just hold up my hand when I'm ready to move on. Okay, the highlights of her literary career. There is some disagreement about exactly how many novels, how many short stories, and whatever. And you see a different count on the numbers of books that she has published because some people are counting it differently and counting all of the books, not just detective novels, and all of the short story collections. And then The Mousetrap is really interesting. That has been uh, that's the play. Uh, and I saw that in London. It was really great. Uh, that has been on stage in London longer than any other play, any place. And it's really a fascinating play. And then you have the three main characters, Hercules Poirot, Miss Marple, Tommy and Tuppence, and they have been active in these short stories for as long as she was uh, writing about them. And the bestsellers, and then there were none, Murder on the Orient Express, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. You probably have all have seen these or read them, right? Most people. So I won't be giving anything away when I talk about them. And then you have the adaptations and the cultural impact. At least 30 feature films. And then there have none gone through 3 or 4 different adaptations, and the same as the others, the more popular films. And then you have documentaries about Christie, including the most recent, the 3-part BBC series that was actually also um, on BBC and also on the PBS version of that. And The Mousetrap, of course, 28,000 performances of that, which is incredible. Video games, podcasts, festivals. And of course, how many people have gone to Malice Domestic? As you probably know, uh, the award given away at Malice Domestic every year is the Agatha Award, and that's given in various categories. Okay. The writing style and the golden age, you know, the detection class. Sorry, I'm having eaten drinking tea here, trying to keep in my focus going on. I was up most of the night trying to get everything in place after stepping on the thumb drive. So the Detection Club was this group of British writers who came together and decided to come up with this idea of the Knox commandments, where there are things that the writers agreed that they would do and not do. And one thing was that they would not give away too much, but at the same time, they would come up with the Knox commandments that allowed them to play fair with the reader. And Agatha Christie agreed to do this as the other writers did. But she at one point with the 1939 mystery, which I'll be talking more about, did seem to violate some of the rules. And this is the golden age of the mystery novel. At the same time, in the 1920s and 30s, you have Raymond Chandler and the other hardball mystery writers, and they were speaking fairly badly of the cozy writers. The idea of a cozy mystery is something that's new. And the writers of the golden age were not talking about their writing in terms of being cozy novels. They were talking about traditional mysteries, and the idea of a cozy model, a cozy book, is something that comes along in the 1950s and 60s and really is talked about it as cozy later in the 1970s and 80s. So when Christie and the others were talking about this in the Dutching Club, they were talking about it in terms of a traditional classic mystery.
Right.
And some people still talk about it that way. Christie never thought of herself as writing a cozy mystery in that sense. So we're dealing with something different. Chandler, if you read his essay, talk about the mysteries as being something that was not really the kind of mystery that anyone reading about traditional or classic mysteries were interested in. He talked about, as you know, the main streets of the city and introduced a lonely night in the form of Marlowe. And he said that when you were reading these books by Christie and the others, that they were uh, introducing these mysteries that were not really what people were looking for when they thought about traditional detective fiction. And he talked about the idea of the lonely knight who was really introducing and writing about real crime. And he talked about Agatha Christie and the others as uh, writing not necessarily detective fiction and writing something that many women were attracted to, but were not really books that men were that interested in, because the characters that they introduced were these um, people in villages writing about crime that was not particularly interesting with female sleuths. And in fact, when Agatha Christie was writing about it, she herself said that she was putting out sausage cutter books that were not really the kind of thing that men would be interested in. And she talked about writing for entertainment rather than the kind of thing Raymond Chandler and the others were writing when they were writing these about the main streets. Um, and in retrospect, this idea of the cozy mystery is something that comes along, as I said, in the 1980s and 1990s. And when you look at what we're looking at in the period, the 1980s and 1990s, the Agatha Christie and other books from the books of the 1920s and 30s, those traditional books are not the same thing that we're seeing in the 1980s and 90s and after. And I will talk about those shortly. I'm getting through this quickly so I can get to that. So the blueprint for what we're looking at in the 1980s and 90s goes back to this closed circle of settings, the unreliable narrators, the twisty endings, and the archetypes. And what we're looking at with these is the whole idea of suspects, the likely suspects in the closed circles, and the endings that were uh, twists, twist the endings, and the idea of outwitting the reader. Actually, there's been a recent anthology to which I contributed a short story, but it was based on the Knox commandments. And so if you go to that, you can see a lot of those, but I'll talk about those in a moment. Okay, if we can move on. So the Agatha Christie books and short stories, we got uh, 2 billion copies of her novels being sold. And the only other novelist to compete with her is Stephen King, who is MWA Grandmaster. He, as you all know, wrote a lot of crime fiction as well as his thrillers and the other stories. But he has so many books and is competing with her. But she is still, at this point, the best-selling mystery writer, although he at one point was outperforming her. Now she is back in first place again in terms of crime fiction. The United Nations organization that promotes and cooperates in education, science, culture, and communication, and uh, says that she is the most translated individual author, has her books in 180 languages. And she is studied by academic groups and fan conventions and uh, annual festivals. Has anyone attended the Popular Culture Association uh, annual conference? There they have a group of writers who are a group of academics who are studying crime and present on crime fiction, and they also are have Agatha Christie as one of the topics that they're studying, and every year they people are presenting on that as well as other things. Okay, if we can move along. So the first book that gained a great deal of attention uh, was published in 1926, and that was the murder that um, seemed to break or violate the rules of fair play in terms of what she was presenting. And has anyone not read that book? I don't want to give away too much, but as you know, if you read it, it's probably uh, it's one of the more controversial books for a lot of reasons, but it did introduce this idea of the unreliable narrator, in which a book in which the narrator himself turns out to be the killer, and we find this out at the end. And people argue that it's fair because if you go back and read the book again, you realize that she was giving away the information. The narrator was telling you something about it, but because people assumed that the narrator was a reliable narrator, Dr. Shepard was a reliable narrator, they didn't really pay that much attention to it. And when you go back and read it again, knowing that uh, some of the things he's talking about, he's telling you what he's doing, but you leap over it and keep reading because you assume that he's reliable. And this is the same kind of thing you do with Gone Girl and the modern books where people are unreliable. And now we know that when we're reading about what the narrator is saying, that it's quite possible that the narrator is unreliable nowadays. So we got Murder on the Orient Express. This is one of my favorite of the novels published in 1934, and it's inspired by the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. Do you all know about that? The true crime most people do. Uh, so you have the Lindbergh baby kidnapped from the nursery and disappears, and they're searching for the baby, and 6 weeks later they find the body of the baby dead about a mile from the house from which he was kidnapped. And so you have Agatha Christie having this murder on the Orient Express, and she has all of the people involved in the Lindbergh kidnapping, people, her version of those people, and they come together to exact collective justice against the killer, the kidnapper. And you have Perot on the book and on the train, and the train stops, is isolated, and he goes about questioning the suspects. This is an example of that closed circle of suspects. And he questions each one and finally concludes, finally realizing that they have come together to commit this crime. If you've seen the movie, you have the end where you have the flashback and you see them going one by one in and gathering in this sleeping car and killing this man, each of them stabbing the person that they're killing, so they're all guilty of murder. And Perot is very sympathetic to the killers in terms of what they've done, because this man is the person who's responsible for the kidnapping. And then you have Death on the Nile, and that's in 1937. And if you've seen that, there have been several versions of that, but it occurs above a tourist ship in the Nile. And it's in a flashback, we have this woman played by Mia Farrow in the first version of this. And she has a friend, and she is poor, and uh, wants her boyfriend to get a job with Lynette, who is this wealthy heiress. And the boyfriend, the lover, falls in love with Lynette, and they get married. And then you have the woman who is tracking them and hounding them while on their honeymoon. She joins them on this tour boat, and she is, you know, actually hounding them. And because of this small circle of suspects, when Lynette is killed, the question of who killed her. There's a writer aboard. There are several other people who are standard characters in Agatha Christie novel in this small circle of suspects. And then someone else is killed. One of the servants on board is killed, and the question of who had reason to kill this other person. And so you get her killed trying to figure this out. And finally, we learn at the end that the lover and the friend have come together and they've staged this killing. And then there were none. This is the one that actually probably brought me to the attention of the people who were putting on the Agatha Christie Festival. In my very first book, my first nonfiction book, called Out of the Woodpile, because I wanted to use the actual name, and I'm going to use the name because if you read the first edition of the book, you know that the first name of the book was 10 Little Niggers, based on the rhyme, the nursery rhyme. And then they changed that was the title in the UK. In the United States, the title was The Ten Little Indians, and both were racist titles. And this is the interesting part because Agatha Christie named the book, as you probably know, most of her books during this period were named after nursery rhymes. And she used this title because she was writing about this the books, the small figurines, statues that were broken one by one as the people in uh, on this island were being killed. And and they were dying in the same way as these first these characters, these little African characters, and then when they change it, the little Indian characters. And in the nursery rhymes, they would kill one by one until there was a last character who was left alone and killed himself because he was the only person there on the island and had been warned that when the actual killer killed himself, that he would be the last person left alone there. And so you have the nursery rhyme and this closed circle of suspects, and the whole question of what was the motive? Why are these 10 people who were invited to the island being killed? The name of the island now in recent editions of the novels, Indian Island, and the people, and it was Indian Island, now it's Soldier Island, and the characters being killed off, there's little Indians, little figurines of people being killed are little soldiers. They changed it from Indian Island, of course, because of this, it was considered racist, as in the 10 little niggers and 10 little Indians also racist. And they didn't really change this until around the 1960s when in the United States and in England, there were civil rights groups, a movement, and they were complaining about the title of the books. And so they changed it then to take that into account. Okay, if we can move along. So when you're looking at the settings in the Christie mysteries, the country homes, the remote islands, the luxury trains, the cruise ships and resorts, you got villages and hotels, and I have the examples of each of these where they're located. And Christie's settings appear in modern books, and the question of do they work? And yes, they do. In fact, my first novel, Death's Favorite Child, is set in St. Ives, which I call St. Regis in the book, and it's set in Cornwall, and it's in a private hotel. They have private hotels over there, which are like inns. And I was in Cornwall, and I had gone over to meet a friend, and we were staying. I took the train from London up to Cornwall, and the stories were set in St. Ives, Regis in my book, and I used the characters, the people who were staying in the private hotel, like at permission of the man, the couple who owned the hotel, to use some version, and people who were staying there agreed to allow me to use some version of them, and uh, the town becomes my version of the Agatha Christie setting, and it was on the British Riviera, and I use this seashore town, and the artists who gathered there became. I only use I tried to use what was going on in the city and the countryside, and that worked quite well. Um, and I introduced characters that were inspired by the people I was seeing. The thing that was different, and that is different for, if you'll move on to the next, for the influence on writers of color, the whole question of how we use this, how we actually use the Christie novels, the Christie short stories, and the influence. And I talk about this in greater detail at the Agatha Christie conference because not that many people there were reading writers of color, and that's why they wanted me to come over and talk about it. But the thing about that is the Christie's presenting what we think of as racism and xenophobia in terms of what she was presenting, as with the Nancy Drew short stories and novels. Uh, there is this kind of difference in terms of what writers of color are presenting. All of us have read the Agatha Christie books and short stories and Nancy Drew, and so the whole question of how you respond to something that is racist or xenophobic, or even if updated, is not how we think about these themes. And so what most of us do is either choose to ignore what is going on in the Christie books and use the structure, but ignore the themes and the other things that were going on, or have the Agatha Christie structure and then respond to it. And so, for example, you get a recent book, and I have those. Does anyone have access to that list of books handy, close by? Okay, I'll pull that up at the end. But when you look at Kelly Garrett, for example, or other writers who are writing about close circle of suspects and who are writing in the tradition of Agatha Christie, what they do is introduce the character of color as the protagonist, and then there is this kind of conversation going on between what Agatha Christie does in her books and short stories, and what happens when you introduce a protagonist who is a person of color, and you're dealing with not only the themes Agatha Christie introduced, but you're also dealing with social issues. So, for example, when I was writing about Death's Favorite Child and setting it in the same kind of setting that Christie did, I introduced African American character, an African American protagonist, Lizzie Stewart, and I based her on this idea of, sorry, ignore that. I based her on this idea of what I was seeing in Cornwall, that I was the only person of color, except this one black couple that I saw and one schoolgirl that I saw with some other schoolgirls. And so this idea of what Lizzie does when she is the only character there, and her best friend Tess is the person who's there and is the writing a book about travel in St. Ives. And so what happens when Lizzie arrives there, and she is there and present when the victim, who is the housekeeper for the owners of the inn, and is uh, actually about college age, and she is killed, and Lizzie witnesses when she goes into shock after gummy balls. Gummy balls is my weapon of choice. And she goes into shock because she's allergic to peanuts. And she dies up on the walking trail around, the actual walking trail around this St. Ives, and Lizzie is there when it happens, and there's a police officer from Philadelphia who is there visiting his retired friend, and they become involved in this investigation. And this is when John Quinn, who later appears in my series, he was supposed to have been a one-off in the original series, and I brought him and my character Lizzie Stewart over to St. Ives, and they end up meeting there. And he was going to appear in this one book still, but at the end, my friend said, because they had gotten to know each other and they were getting along well, and she said, well, he can't just disappear. And so there's a kiss between the two characters at the end. And at that point, after that, all of the people who were reading it said, well, what happened between Lizzie and John Quinn after that? And I was forced to introduce John Quinn because people were expecting some resolution of that. And so that's why he's been around for 5 novels now. And they're getting married in the 7th novel. In the 6th novel, she's meeting his family at Thanksgiving in Arizona and Santa Fe, in New Mexico, I should have said, in Santa Fe. And then in the 7th novel, there's the wedding. And I don't think of them as being a cozy novel. I think of it as traditional because I think of cozy novels as, uh, you know, not having the kind of I have in my books because I'm writing. Lizzie is a crime historian, and in every book there is this real life case that I'm drawing on to write about, using it as inspiration for what I'm writing about as a mystery writer. So that's not quite. I have recipes, excuse me, in some of the books, but they're all based on or inspired by true crime. So the true crime that happened in the past, and that's connected to and linked to the real life crime, and that's linked to or inspires the mystery that I'm writing about.
Excellent. I wanted to talk to you briefly. The Agatha Christie estate has actually announced that Agatha Christie herself is teaching a writing class. What are your thoughts,
Yeah.
Frankie?
Yeah, I was reading about that, and that is BBC is actually sponsoring that apparently, but they have an avatar of Agatha Christie, and they have an actress doing her voice, and the avatar is there, and they actually use quotes from Agatha Christie, and that's why she's teaching the class. She has a bunch of quotes where she actually talks about how she perceives writing, and she in fact that's when she talks about making sausage, and she talks about what she does, and they're pulling from her notebooks, and they have she had a do you know about the notebooks that she wrote, that she kept? The notebooks are really interesting, and that's where she was, for all of the books she was writing. She didn't actually have writer's notebooks. She used calendar notebooks. She wrote things on napkins. As many of us, are writing, and we keep notebooks. She was using calendars. She was using cookbook. She was using anything she happened to pull up. She was writing, and so she has novels. When she's writing novels, they're in lots of different books, and so she has to go through and find those. And that's one of the reasons it's really difficult to actually keep track of how she was developing the ideas, because she was writing and jotting that down, and anything she happened to have handy. And so her granddaughter went through and numbered all the books, but it's still hard to find, where she was writing about the books. writing, but she did go through and anything that occurred to her, she was writing it down and she was writing scraps of what she was doing. And she has 73 notebooks. And the notebooks are cookbooks and calendars and whatever she had handy. And that's where she actually tries out the ideas that she's going to use. And she actually, and when she was writing books, she actually came up with versions of the novels. And then she went back and, for and then there are none, for example, as it's known there. She couldn't decide who the protagonist was going to be for that, so she tried various protagonists. In short story, she had a different protagonist. She ended up, when she finally wrote it as a novel, she ended up with that being a parole novel, but she had, in the beginning, even thought about having Miss Marple as the protagonist. But she ended up with, him in the end. As she changed the short story and used a different version of that when she was writing the novel. And the same thing happens with the various books. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at what they're going to be doing with it.
Well, thank you. I put a link in for everyone to the Agatha Christie's Complete Secret Notebooks, which
Hmm.
I think it's by John Curran. I actually own a copy, and it's fascinating to see her thought process when she was writing. Um, for anyone
And
who,
there's a book that I'll give you the link for as well.
oh,
I don't know if you have it. It's called The New Bedside Bathtub and Armchair Companion to Agatha Christie.
yeah,
And they go through it and do all of the books, and there are a series of essays, and they talk about the different fiction, different films based on the books. And for example, they give you for and then there were none. They show you who appeared in each of the books based on that novel, and they have all of the films are also included in this, so you can see who appeared in each of those. It's very good. In
I
fact,
just
Publishers Weekly says more than 200,000 copies sold of this book. It's an ideal gift for Christie addicts.
I included the link to that as well. I actually own that as well. So I was fortunate enough to be receive as a gift all the I forget what the Bantam copies of Agatha Christie's works, and that came with it. So it is a great one. So I've included that link. And Betsy Barker has informed us that your interview with Lucy Worsley is still available on PBS Passport for anyone who has a PBS Passport membership and wants to see that interview. Highly
Yeah, I
recommend.
think it may be on YouTube as well. I
It
know it
could be.
was at one point.
It could
But
be.
yeah, it's on PBS if you have it.
Yes. So does anyone have any questions for Frankie if you want to put them in the comments here in the chat?
Or anything you want to talk about it, about Agatha Christie. I see chat, but not, okay. Oh, yeah, Betsy says I saw Lucy on. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to do. Uh, in if you've seen her, she I think she's retiring from some of the things she was doing, but she is actually the historian, or was. I think she still is doing that. Uh, she may have turned that over to someone else and she's doing other things, but she is or was the curator of the crown jewels in the Tower of London, and she's the curator of all of the properties uh, for the crown, and all of the mansions and all of the things across the country. very down-to-earth woman, though. I was kind of intimidated by her, but she was very nice, very down-to-earth. And the thing was really interesting, though, because the director of the documentary was down on the floor, sitting there as we talk, and uh, she was pointing and bringing things up and editing, and then she would say, as we were going along, she would stop what we were talking and say, I want you to say that again in a different way. And then we had to go back and figure out how to say it again so that it would be user friendly, because we would go off on these tangents and she didn't want us to say it that way. And so it was really interesting to see how they were doing it. And
So
then
it
they
looked
stopped everything and played it all back, and then they edited the whole thing again.
amazing. Actually, it looks like Liz, Mavens of Mayhem. She was very happy to hear that Lucy Worsley is nice and down to earth. I think we all are. I think we're all fans.
Yeah, she was someone you would hope would be really nice, and she was.
That's always great when it works out that way, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So, does anyone have any other questions? Our chat is very quiet. Any questions for Frankie? Oh, that was Mally who asked that. I'm sorry, Mally. It was Mally who was happy to hear Lucy Worsley was nice, but Liz is too. Um, and I have a winner in the meantime, while people formulate their questions if they have them, are the winner of Frankie's signed book, and I don't know which one you're giving away, Frankie. Which book are
I
you?
thought I would give away Death's Favorite Child. I don't have a copy of the book.
Perfect.
But I want to know if the person who won the book, who was it?
It's Kirsten Marcial. She's on the
Uh,
meeting right now. Yes.
yeah, I wondered if you wanted the first edition, which is the beautiful uh cover here, or if you want the other cover, the uh more recent edition, which is a reissue of this book with another publisher, and they have the version they have is a darker version with the private hotel. Or you can have both if you like them.
She would like the first edition, please, she said.
Okay.
And
The beautiful.
I have her
Yeah.
email address, so I can get in touch with her and get her address and send that off to you. And this way you two can connect and you can send that book to her. In the meantime, it looks like Susan Tromenhauser has a question. What was the fallout from Agatha breaking Knox commandments?
Yeah, she got a lot of pushback from that because they she they took an oath in the club that none of them would break the commandments. And so there was a debate among the critics and among the members of the club themselves about whether she had broken the commandments because she had not given sufficient clues. And so they had argued at the time, the critics argued that she had not played fair. But in retrospect, people looking back from the modern period where we're used to this, twist the ending and everything, have argued that if you go back and read, and critics now say as well, if you go back and read the book, that you do pick up hints that it was this narrator who is unreliable narrator and that you couldn't trust him. And they give her credit for burying this cleverly. And so if you go back and read it, you pick it up. But the people at the time said it was unfair and she didn't play fair.
Nina has a question. Agatha famously disappeared after her first husband asked for a divorce. Do you think that had an effect on her writing?
Most people think that it did because she was traumatized and but some people, some of the critics at the time, and some people still think that it might have been a marketing kind of ploy to get people's attention to sell more books. But she says that, and she says she doesn't remember some of that. That she disappeared, she came back, and she didn't remember some of what happened. And But so you can take it or leave it in terms of what she says about you. She didn't know what happened. She was traumatized. She needed to get away. But most people give her credit for telling the truth about it. But some people say some of the people were writing tough guy mysteries at the time. Some of the media said it was just a kind of ploy to sell more books. And it did because people were curious about whether something was going to turn up in the books in terms of what she did.
Makes sense. Is any other questions before we close out and say goodbye to Frankie? I don't see any others, so I'm going to
And I
thank.
apologize for being disorganized today
That's
because
perfect.
if I hadn't stepped on my thumb drive, I would have been much more organized.
It's all fine. I think we're all struggling with trying to make the segue from summer into autumn. So, oh, there's one quick question from Jessica Eubank. What's your question, Jessica? We'll just try to squeeze it in. Jenna says, thank you for staying up late to redo the slides.
Oh, no problem. But
I think we all appreciate that. Right. And before we close, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to next month's program, which is our own Mally Becker. Two-time Agatha Award nominated author Mally Becker will share lessons learned to help writers build their characters' fictional world. Whether you write cozies, neo-noir mysteries, or anything in between, you'll need to get the facts right to maintain your story's illusion of reality. How can you balance research with strong storytelling? Where do you find sources to pull a reader into your fictional world? How can you approach experts who'll add more truthiness to your fiction? Is it ever fair to bend the truth? And that is on October 18th. That's a Saturday, same time, same channel. And the name of the presentation is World Building for Mystery Writers. So we hope you'll all come back and tell your
I
friends.
want to see that because I did Rural Billy on my website. I want to see if I did it right.
There you go. We'll find out next month. So thank you. Thank you so much, Frankie, for all the time you put into your presentation. And it was great having you here. And I think you represented all of us in trying to transition into a more serious time of year of autumn, but struggling. So and thank you. I think we all learned something about Agatha too. So many thanks, Frankie.
If I find the version of the original PowerPoint, I will post that because it's better than what I ended up with late last night.
In the meantime, I think we have your permission to send everyone the PDF of what you presented today if they would
Yeah.
like it.
And
Okay,
if I
well,
find the other one on the other thumb drive, I'll send that one along.
that'd be terrific. So watch your emails, members, and we'll send this along. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frankie.
You're welcome.